Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, and I'm here reading my stuff. We are continuing the Starfleet Corps of Engineers story, Here There Be Monsters, which was an epilogue to the Gateways crossover in 2001, and also features the crew dealing with a bunch of, well, monsters. One amusing thing about this, the reference to the previous adventure on Maeglin was never actually chronicled. That was an adventure that happened before the series started. I always think it's odd. There's been a tendency in a lot of fiction to start the story at the beginning of somebody's career, and that's not always the most interesting way to do it. And certainly in the case of the Da Vinci's been around for a while. It wasn't a new ship. And while there's been a tendency in a lot of the Star Trek shows to, particularly the Star Trek spin-offs, to have them sort of pick up right at the beginning. You know, it's the Enterprise D's first mission, it's Deep Space Nine's first thing as Deep Space Nine, it's Voyager's maiden voyage, and so on. It's Enterprise's Archer's Enterprise maiden voyage. The original series was in the middle of their 5-year mission, and they'd had other missions before that, and I think that's a more interesting way of doing a Star Trek story. And the Da Vinci also has had plenty of adventures prior to when the series started. In fact, we've got one coming up. One of the upcoming storylines is called War Stories, which has flashbacks to the Dominion War. That's what, actually, I think that's the next one we're doing. So, in June and July. So yeah. Anyway, let us continue with Here There Be Monsters, Chapter 6. Andrea Lipinski felt ridiculous holding a bright blue phaser in her left hand. Normally, Lipinski liked the look and feel of Type 1 phasers. Easy to handle with one hand and able to change settings quickly, and they always hit their target. But normally, the phaser wasn't so blue. Worse, because it was covered in this blue whatever it was, she couldn't change the settings, so she was carrying a remote in her right hand, and her hand was covered with a small force field, so the hand was useless except for holding the remote. All this because of what the Andrasi did to Maeglin. Lipinski made a mental note to strangle the next Andrasi she happened to come across. She also made a mental note to strangle Corsi. Bad enough she had a blue phaser, but also a blue bug. She had been assigned to accompany the Nasset. "Are you okay?" Blue asked, causing Lipinski to jump and aim her phaser at the surprise noise. "Easy," Blue added, waving 2 of her icky arm-like things. "I'm on your side, remember?" That's easier for you to say, she thought. I'm fine. You don't like bugs." Lipinski blinked. Well, no. How'd you know that?" "Body language. You get that instinctive human jerkiness every time I'm around. Most people get over it after they've gotten used to having me around. Well, except Carol when she wants to get into a snit about some imagined slight I perpetrated in our quarters, but you haven't yet. Every time I come across it, it usually means some kind of entomophobia." Lipinski actually chuckled. "Figures." "What?" Blue asked while making one of those weird noises she always made. "You're an engineer, so of course you've got some kind of technical term for it." "Of course," Blue said with another funny noise. "It's how we fool people into thinking we know more than we do." "You mean you don't?" Lipinski asked, perhaps a bit too snidely. "Oh, sure we do. Just not as much as we let on." Lipinski honestly couldn't tell if Blue was joking or not, and that just irritated her more. They kept walking through the underbrush of this jungle in the middle of the main continent on Maeglin, where most of the Tellarites had set up their homes. It was humid, and Lipinski's uniform was starting to stick to her skin. Why the hell does Starfleet insist on these damn 2-layer uniforms anyhow? Blue let out a kind of bell-like noise. "What is it?" Lipinski asked, raising her phaser. The Keston tricorder's not working again. Damn duonetic field." Lipinski tried to relax a little. "Just take it easy. She's not going to crawl all over you or eat you or anything like that. She's a crewmate, not like those things back home on... Don't think about it." They moved into a clearing. Blue tapping commands into a tricorder that responded by making none of its telltale noises. "Why couldn't Corsi have put me with Stevens? He's nice and cute. Maybe if we were paired up, I'd finally screw up the courage to ask him out." But Corsi had teamed up with Stevens herself, which was odd in and of itself. She usually went with officers. Lipinski wondered if there was anything to that. Nah, not Corp Reach. Heart of duranium she's got. Blue made a chirpy noise, scaring Lipinski out of 10 years of life, punctuated by an exclamation of, "There we go! Tricorder's working, and now we've got a fix. Follow me." Then she got down on all eights and started skittering forward at some ridiculous speed. Lipinski struggled both to keep up and to keep her lunch down. Watching those legs skitter like that reminded her way too much of don't think about that. They ran through some more underbrush, then came out at what Lipinski thought was another clearing, but was in fact a field of farmland. Lipinski hadn't the first clue what any of it was, and at that moment she didn't care, because it was what was in the middle of the field of crops that had her undivided attention. It was a giant bug. Dealing with small bugs from home had been bad enough. Don't think about it. Dealing with serving on the same ship as a human-sized bug had been barely tolerable. But this thing was several meters long, had 6 icky, spindly legs that were all longer than Lipinski was tall, big wings that looked flimsy for all their size, and huge eyes that bore into her head like, "Shoot it!" Lipinski blinked. "What?" She realized that the bug was moving away from them at a speed that even Blue wouldn't be able to keep up with. "Shoot it, or it'll get away!" Setting her phaser on light stun with her encased right hand, she fired. The bug didn't even notice the amber beam that struck its thorax. Of course not, they're indestructible, like, don't think about it. Raising the level to heavy stun, she fired again, just as the bug was going out of sight. However, heavy stun got the thing's attention. It stopped and started to turn. She fired again. It made some kind of odd noise and also raised 2 of its legs in some kind of gesture. With growing confidence, Lipinski fired again. It made another odd noise-gesture combination, but she didn't let it bother her. This isn't so bad. She believed that right up until it charged at her. "Oh God, I'm going to die," was the only thought that ran through her head as a several-meter-long bug that was roughly the size of the moon she grew up on charged toward her at some obscenely high speed. She couldn't move. She couldn't act. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think beyond the fact that she was dead meat, and that she was, as she had always feared, going to die at the hands of an insect. Then, suddenly, the insect stopped moving forward, as if it had crashed into something, just as the air crackled with a force field. Of course, that was the plan, after all. I fire on it to distract it and goad it into coming close, then Blue hits it with the force field. The insect continued to make odd noises and gesture a lot. "Sometimes," Lipinski muttered, "I really, really hate this job." "Did you say something?" Blue asked. Nothing. What now?" Blue made some of those damn noises of hers. "That's unfortunate." "What is?" "The UT can't make heads or tails of this. It's looking more and more likely that these things aren't sentient." Lipinski made a face. "What? You thought these things might be? Any particular reason why I shouldn't?" While she couldn't really read Blue's tone very well, Lipinski realized that the Nassat probably took offense at that statement. "I'm sorry, it's just that you're an entomophobe, and you can't imagine insectoid life being sentient." In fact, that was exactly what Lipinski had been thinking, but Blue made it sound so prejudicial. It's probably because it is prejudicial. "I'm sorry," she repeated, sounding more emphatic this time. "I guess old habits die hard." "Usually, yes." She made another noise, then tapped her comm badge. "Blue to Gomez." "Go ahead." "We've neutralized the large insect." Blue then gave the coordinates of their location, to which the commander replied, "Good work. I'll let the Law Enforcement Bureau know, and they'll collect it." "According to the reports from the Maeglin, we've got at least 5 more to go, correct?" 4, actually. Jill and Friesner got one also. Duffy, Drew, and I are hot on the trail of the Pteranodon-like one, and Corsi and Stevens think they're close to the green one. You 2 see if you can track down one of the other 2. "Acknowledged." Blue tapped her comm badge, reached into the bag she had tucked into her chitinous armor, and pulled out another force field generator. "Shall we?" Lipinski took a long look at the force field-encased giant insect as it kept wailing and gesturing. "Wish we'd had those damn force fields back home." "Yeah, okay. Let's go." Chapter 7. I should have been a bird, Kieran Duffy thought giddily as he flew through the air. In his life, both as a kid growing up and taking apart the family replicator, and later as a Starfleet engineer, Kieran had encountered all manner of technological devices, but his favorites were always the gravity boots his uncle got him for his 16th birthday. The 6 months that followed that birthday were among the happiest of Kieran's life, and among the unhappiest of his parents, as they were convinced he was going to break his neck crashing into something, or several somethings. He wore the boots so much that Dad was convinced his feet had atrophied. Unfortunately, where the pleas of his parents and the endless safety lectures from his uncle failed to curb his enthusiasm, biology succeeded. Kieran hit his growth spurt midway through his 17th year, and soon the boots no longer fit. And there was no way in hell his parents were going to let him have another pair. Then came Starfleet Academy, and one of the happiest days of his life, when they issued him gravity boots as part of an exercise. After being denied his favorite toy for 3 years, someone willingly gave them to him. He quickly amazed Professor Shu with his prowess, and he was instantly recruited for the 3D polo team. He was captain of the team by senior year and led the academy to the championships twice. But all of that was secondary to the sheer joy of being able to fly through the air unfettered like this. No encumbrances, no ship's walls surrounding you, nothing holding you in place. Being able to tell the wind was shifting just by listening to it, and the view was just spectacular. Kieran particularly appreciated being able to take in Maeglin this way. The last time they were here, he had been too busy dealing with Overseer Byron and his Andrasi goons to truly appreciate the natural beauty here. He could see what the Tellarites, who founded the colony a century ago, saw in it. Growing up in the heavily technological Earth of the 24th century, getting to see something as magnificently pastoral as Maeglin was a rare treat. Now he wished he'd ordered up more blue gravity boots so the rest of the crew could see what he was seeing. "Lieutenant Commander Duffy, come in, damn it!" "Yes, Mom," Kieran said instinctively. Sorry, Commander." "I've been calling you for a full minute." Sonny sounded rather peeved. "Sorry," he repeated. "I've been, distracted." "I'll bet. Well, get your head out of the clouds." Kieran couldn't resist. "That's going to be hard up here." A pause. "I walked into that, didn't I? With both feet, your eyes wide open, and a bullseye on your face. You know, Kieran, between that and the mom line, you're cruising for a serious bruising when you come back down to Earth." "Yes, sir." "Anyhow," he added quickly before Sonny could reply, "any sign of the big guy?" "Unfortunately, the duonetic field has kicked in, so we're not picking up anything. That's why I contacted you. I was hoping you saw something." "Afraid not, but He cut himself off as he saw the giant orange shape flying right at him, and getting closer by the second. "Check that, Sonny. I've got him. I'll lead him to..." He looked around. Hell, I've lost my bearings. Where are you?" "Right where you left us. Unfortunately, I have no idea where you are since the tricorder's out." Joy. Kieran immediately started flying toward the orange pteranodon-like creature. Just as it lunged right at him, he swerved downward. Luckily, gravity boots had controls on the inside and were manipulated by pressure made by the toes. Jill's paint had no effect on it, and the way it did on the touch-sensitive displays on the other devices. Angered, the creature flew down after Kieran as planned, except of course Sonny and Drew weren't right under him because he'd been too busy reliving his callow youth to pay attention to where he was. "Damn it, Duff, you're an officer now, not a 16-year-old. Clowning is one thing when it's just you and the gang horsing around, but we do have a job here." As he neared the tree line, Kieran angled his body upward and shifted the boot's acceleration so he'd start flying horizontally. It wasn't the most elegant of turns, but it didn't need to be, as long as he surprised his quarry. Unfortunately, it was better equipped for flying than Kieran. It recovered quickly, and it was gaining on him. Figures. He's been flying all his life. I've been flying as a hobby on and off. Of course he's better at it. He found himself over a lake. Okay, let's see how he likes this. Hope Jill made that stuff waterproof. Again, he angled himself downward, again shifting the boot's acceleration. It was only about 6 meters down to the lake. At least I hope it's a lake. And it isn't a shallow one. Suppose I should have checked that before. He broke through the ice-cold water, which was like being repeatedly slapped by a wet towel. He went down about 3 meters before his momentum lessened enough to allow him to turn around. No sign of him. He looked up and saw a water-distorted image of the monster was circling the area of the lake. Guess he doesn't like the water. Gomez to Duffy. We've got the tricorders again. What the hell are you doing underwater? Sound traveled just fine underwater, but Kieran was in no position to answer just yet. He watched the creature's pattern of flight around the lake for 3 revolutions, found a good window, and then fired the boots upward at the right moment so he would, he fervently hoped, surprise the creature and get the jump on it. He burst through the water and zipped upward. The creature made an odd noise and some kind of motion with its tiny feet, and then went up after him. Sorry about that, Sonny, Kieran said, grateful for being able to breathe once again. Needed to keep this thing busy for a moment. Where are you? Keep flying due west for 200 meters, then due south for 50, and you should be right over us. Damn, I did stray, didn't I? Just a bit, yeah. Sorry about that. I should be in position in 30 seconds. Your friend is right behind you, Sonny said, sounding worried. Kieran had kind of figured that, though he didn't bother to turn around, as that would slow him down. By flying ramrod straight, he cut down on his wind resistance and was able to move faster through the air. With the monster's speed, he needed every advantage he could get. After he turned south, he saw Sonny and Drew pretty quickly. Sonny was studying her tricorder intently, then looked up and smiled at him. Drew, of course, had his phaser ready like a good little security guard. Kieran immediately veered downward, again, counting on the creature to follow. He couldn't just land, though. He needed to dump velocity or he'd be a smear on the pastoral Maeglin ground, so he immediately veered back up, crying, "Get him!" Unfortunately, the whole plan was predicated on his quarry following him down, Drew shooting it, and Sonny slapping the force field on. The creature, however, was not cooperating. It learned its lesson from the last time it followed Kieran in a downward trajectory and almost got wet. It remained circling over Kieran and Drew. Kieran's own trajectory took him back upward, and he slowed the boots down as he rose, then hovered in the air, even with the monster circling, but from a distance of about 30 meters. He tapped his comm badge. Okay, that didn't work. Brilliant observation, Sonny said dryly. On one of its go-rounds, it must have caught sight of Kieran, because then it made another screechy noise, waved its feet some more, and flew right toward him. Yike! Kieran cried and started flying away. Drew, bless his heart, chose that moment to fire his phaser, which stopped the flying monster dead in its tracks. The phaser blast didn't do any harm, it was only a light stun from the sounds of it, but it did force it to reconsider which human it was going to go after. The hell with this, Kieran thought. He flew upward about 50 meters, then angled himself back downward, and flew straight for the ground, except for the fact that he had placed himself so that the creature was smack between him and the surface, which meant that it was rather surprised to find a human crashing into its back. At least, Kieran thought it sounded surprised when he crashed into it. They both went careening toward the ground. About half a second before they hit, Kieran threw the boots into full reverse. Unfortunately, while doing so lessened the impact, it did not negate it as Kieran had hoped. They were going too fast, and the boots could only go so far against that momentum. The impact jarred every bone in his body. As he rolled off the monster crying, "Now!" in the hopes that it would prompt Sonny to put it in the force field, he felt like one massive bruise. You okay? Sonny asked. Fine. Did you? Yes, I got the force field up. It's secure. Mind telling me what you were thinking? I was thinking that, ow! We needed to convince it to come down to Earth. I figured that would do it. You could have broken your neck. Note to self, Kieran thought. Do not ever let Sonny know just how much she sounds like my mother right now. Chapter 8. Bart Falwell was practically on the edge of his seat in the observation lounge, waiting for everyone else to arrive. Captain Gold was first, followed by Commander Gomez, then Patty, and then finally Carol Abramowitz and Dr. Lenz came in together. Commander Duffy, Fabian Stevens, and Commander Corsi were missing, he noticed, but as soon as Carol and the doctor sat down, Gold started the meeting. Before we get down to brass tacks, how's Duffy doing? Gold asked Lenz. Emmett's taking care of him. He's fine, really, just some bumps and bruises. Good, Gold said, though Bart noticed that the captain seemed irked at the doctor for some reason. Where are Stevens and Corsi? He asked Gomez. Still down on the planet. There are two of the things still unaccounted for, and they were hot on the trail of one of them, the big green one. The other one seems to have disappeared, but it's one of the ones the Maeglin made a visual record of, so we know it's out there. And there could be more. Good. Now then, our linguist called this little confab, so talk to us, Falwell. Bart leaned forward in his seat, trying not to sound over-anxious. I've been studying the recordings you've all been making on the planet, and running them through my translation programs, trying to see if there's a language there that the UT isn't picking up for whatever reason. He touched a command on the panel in front of him, and the frozen image of one of the creatures came on the screen. What was confusing was that I found the remnants of a language, but not enough to form a proper translation matrix. Parts of the structure seemed to be missing. Remnants? Gomez asked with a frown. What, they used to know how to talk but only remember parts of it now? That was actually my first thought, Bart said. But no, that's not it. The thing is, the UT and all the other translation programs that have been developed over the years work on either spoken or written language. What else is there? Blue asked. Bart grinned. Watch and learn. He touched the panel again, and the image started to move. It then switched to another creature, then another, then another. I don't get it, Abramowitz said. What are we looking at? I chose these particular images for a reason, Bart said. They all have something in common. Gestures, Gold said suddenly. They're each gesturing. In fact, most of these are the same gestures. Exactly, Bart said, excited. Are any of you familiar with sign language? Sure, Gomez said. I remember people talking about it on the Enterprise. It was right before I came on board. There was this diplomat who couldn't hear. When he lost his interpreters, Commander Data communicated with him through American Sign Language. It's an old way of talking. She smiled, making the connection. Through gestures. Bart nodded. Exactly, he said again. I remember reading about that mission, actually. Advances in technology made sign language pretty much redundant now, which is why your Commander Data had to dig it up in the archives. But there are some similarities between these gestures and some of the basics of various sign languages developed by humans, Vulcans, and Bajorans centuries ago. Enough that I was able to run it through the computer. I think we've got enough that we might be able to communicate with them. Gold leaned forward. So you can program the translators? Wincing, Bart said. Probably not, sir. The UTs are geared toward spoken language. Comm badges don't have optical receptors to pick up the gestures, and their language is a combination of verbalizing and the gestures. The UT just isn't equipped to handle that. I'll need to communicate with them directly and act as an interpreter, the same way Commander Data did on the Enterprise. Smiling, Gomez said, Good work, Bart. Captain, with your permission, Mr. Falwell and I will beam down and start working on communicating with the ones we've captured. Granted, Gold said with a nod. I'll talk to Governor Tack. Sonia wished they had time to stop at sickbay to check on Kieran, but right now the priority was to put Bart's plan into action. If these creatures were sentient, she just hoped they understood why the S.C.E. did what they did to round them up. After all, they were rampaging and causing severe damage to a colony that had enough problems. At least they had so far accomplished that goal in a manner that did the least harm to the creatures themselves. Still, a trip to sickbay would have been nice, she thought, as she, Bart, and Drew stepped onto the transporter platform. Nothing else would give me another chance to yell at him for being such a jerk. She still wasn't 100% sure how she felt about Kieran. Maybe she did love him, but she certainly cared about him enough to really hate the idea of his taking such ridiculous risks with his person as he did today. Being captain of the 3D polo team 15 years ago does not mean you can fly like a lunatic now. Alas, that castigation would have to wait until the mission was over, and would probably be done in the privacy of one of their quarters rather than the middle of sickbay, which would make it that much easier for Kieran to make it up to her. She smiled as they materialized on the planet. As soon as they did, she put thoughts of the future out of her head to concentrate on the present. That present turned out to involve standing around and waiting for Bart to work his magic. The 4 creatures that had been rounded up, besides Duffy's friend, Patty and Lipinski had captured the insect, and one that looked like a furry orange ball with arms and legs and big eyes, and Barnack and Friesner had nailed the yellow scaly one, were then brought to a large warehouse near the Capitol building. Here they had been kept captive by a larger version of the force field, emitting from a bright blue generator. Bart slowly approached the warehouse and started making odd noises and gesturing. This seemed to surprise the creatures, who all moved away from him. Then one of them, the insect, moved closer. Commander? Drew asked, pointing at the insect. Who was it who captured that one? Patty and Lipinski, why? What does mean exactly, Mr. Drew? Sonia asked with a smile. Oh, it's just that, well, Andrea's kind of got this thing about bugs. Bugs. Uh-huh. Don't know the details. Something happened when she was a kid, but she really hates bugs. I think it's kind of funny that Corsi put her with Blue, and they wound up corralling the insect, that's all. Funny's one word for it, Sonia said neutrally. She made a mental note to have a word with Corsi about Lipinski when this was over. Bart, meanwhile, continued his dialogue with the monsters, which seemed to be going well, based on the fact that the conversation was fairly sedate, The monsters weren't smashing up against the force field in an attempt to maul Bart, and Bart had on his intense but enthusiastic look. He'd had it when he was plowing through the Cyclarian Journal last week on Borsatu Minor, too, and Sonia enjoyed seeing it. At one point, the insect was doing almost all of the talking, with Bart only throwing in the occasional comment. Then Bart spoke for several seconds. It's still not a peep from the universal translators. I guess the gestures really are critical to this language. Then, finally, Bart turned around and walked back to Sonia with a grave look on his face. We've got a serious problem, Commander. To be concluded next week. Tune in then for the final part as everything all comes together beautifully. In the meantime, check me out online. You can find me at DeCandido.net, and you can read my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. Please, if you could support me on Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD, that would be awesome. And you should subscribe to this channel as well, so you'll be alerted every time there's a new reading up. And please check out the archives, too. I got tons of readings going all the way back to last year. Thanks very much for watching, and please, stay safe.